This segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Hello again, everyone. I'm Martin Folse, joined on the desk by my old wide receiver in the Bantam League days, Greg Harding. And we're here to remember John Gravois, who was a dear friend of both of us. And I know you're probably a lot closer to him than many out there. Y'all spent a lot of time together. But, you know, we were talking this morning at our Monday meeting here at HTV, and I can honestly say that John was just one of those old-time newspaper reporters that had so much class and dignity in his job. And he just did it with class and dignity every time he went to do a news story. And before I read his obit, just your thoughts, Greg. You were close to John.
Well, I think John Gravois was one of those guys that he was natural at what he did. He was really good at it. And I have so many stories to tell about John. One of the stories, of course, John graduated from Terrebonne High, and I graduated from Terrebonne High, and he went on to become a news reporter for Houma Daily Courier. Yeah. And he was a sports writer. And at the time, I think we had like a 3 or 4-0 record, or maybe 5-0 record. And I think we was playing HF Bourgeois or South Terrebonne, one of those teams. And he came out with a prediction that we was going to actually lose the football game. So lo and behold, we won the game. And we went and found him on the football field. And we brought his butt inside the locker room and showered him with his notes. Fully dressed.
Could do that back in those days.
Yeah, you could do that.
But he was, like you said, a Terrebonne graduate. He might have inspired y'all a little bit to win that game.
Well, yes, he did. He definitely motivated me because I thought, he was a good friend of mine, and we kind of thought he kind of miscited us and didn't really believe in us. But like you said, he was a simple guy, but very intelligent. Don't get it twisted because he's simple that he wasn't intelligent. He was a very intelligent guy. And if you had a problem with John Gravois, something was wrong with you.
I went to the early Saints games when Archie Manning was playing. Me and John would drive up. Me, John, Harry McCullough, missed the ball. And in those days, you could roam around the sidelines. You could go in the press box. You could do whatever you wanted. They wanted people to go to the game. But John he had this sense of humor that was sort of underhanded. But when he wanted to use it, it was deadly. He was pretty good off the quip. Didn't he represent you at one point?
Yeah, actually, it's ironic because I trusted him so much that he represented me when I was playing professional football. Yeah. Him and his brother, Michael basically was the attorney, and John was the more like mouthpiece. Michael was behind the scene guys. And he represented me. He got me, a couple of nice little contracts, especially in my later years with Canada. Yeah. But I trusted him enough that he was able to do that for me.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to read the obit that was written by Jay Root, who was very close to John, because John had another life away from Houma, Louisiana. So if you don't mind, we'll come back and talk about him and hear from John himself, because I did a interview with him early on. But there you see John Gravois. And let me read what Jay wrote. John Gravois, a proud son of Louisiana who loved the newspaper business and New Orleans football almost as much as he adored his family, died Tuesday. He was 67. Gravois, or Grav to his many friends, practically had newsprint running through his veins. He won his first newspaper award in the late 1970s, first place in the Louisiana Press Association contest for a photo of a dejected Houma High School Vanderbilt Catholic baseball catcher surrounded by members of the winning team jumping for joy. More recently, the Dallas Morning News politics team he led won National Headliners Award for his coverage 2 years in a row, and he was one of the editors of the Chronicle's team coverage of Hurricane Harvey, which became a finalist for a 2018 Pulitzer Prize. John was a reporter's editor. I never recall him having to crack the whip, recalled former Fort Worth Star-Telegram reporter John Moritz, who reported to Gravois, then governmental affairs editor from the paper's Austin bureau. His news judgment was unmatched and therefore unquestioned. though Gravois' career propelled him to stop reporting gigs at Houston City Hall, the Texas state capitol, and eventually Congress and the White House. It all began in a far less auspicious setting, a sixth-grade classroom at Legion Park Elementary in his hometown of Houma, Louisiana. His English teacher, Gary Phillips, got permission to start a school newspaper and asked Gravois to be the editor. He didn't hesitate, and soon the preteen was chronicling sports events and the school lunch menu, which often included home state favorites like jambalaya and red beans and rice, with the zeal he would later exhibit when landing big political scoops in Washington. As humble as it was, I relished each and every issue of Legion Legends and got a charge out of seeing my name in print, even if it was just in blue mimeograph type, he would later recall. During his time at the Houston Post, where he worked from 1981 to 1995, Gravois was a straight-down-the-line journalist, recalled his former colleague Ken Herman. He cared about the craft, and he cared about doing it the right way. He started on the night cops beat, covering police and crime, and, as he later told his fellow reporter, Gordon Selby, quote, learning the plight of people in poor communities, in the quote, and the delivery of services or lack thereof in Texas. He was quickly promoted to City Hall and then the Austin Bureau, where he marveled at the often raucous Texas legislator. The ranks of Texas politics in the 80s and 90s were full of virtual quote machines, and with flamboyant characters spewing homespun gems that colorfully helped bring our stories to life. Gravois recalled later, the easiest way to strike gold was to catch former Texas Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock when he was in a good mood, sort of like John Kennedy today. As a political journalist, he was on hand for lots of Texas political history, whether performed on the big stage or in smaller settings, such as one particular West Texas campfire during the 1990 gubernatorial campaign, a slugfest between Democrat Ann Richards and Republican Clayton Williams, a couple of ever-quotable combatants. Gravois was among a small handful of reporters invited by Williams for an outing at his West Texas ranch. 2020, when Williams died, Gravois recalled that the Texas oil man reveled in the adventure, getting journalists far from their comfort zone, making us hop awkwardly on horses for a classic roundup. And it was also on that trip that Williams, around the campfire with male reporters, made his infamous remark comparing inclement weather to rape. Quote, relax and enjoy it, he said, which was duly reported by Gravois and other reporters at the scene. Williams' foot and mouth led to his humiliating loss to Richards. Gravois was promoted to the Washington Bureau after only 2 years in Austin. Finally, in 1994, John handed in his reporting notebook for an editor's pen, sometimes called a scalpel, and went on to direct legions of reporters at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Houston Chronicle, and Dallas Morning News. For all his obsessions about colorful athletes and flawed politicians, Gravois loved his family more than any story he ever wrote, any game he ever covered, any confidential tip he ever received. He couldn't contain his pride when he talked about his children, Joy and Nick, not to mention his grandchildren. His wife, Suzanne, was his sweetheart and best friend, and his devotion to her was matched only by her steadfast love and care for him in his final hours as he fought a valiant battle against cancer. Grav grabbed hold of his southern Louisiana roots like a treasure chest, from the spicy food and Mardi Gras celebrations to the region's corruption-prone politics and flashy sports figures. He wasn't one to foist his religion on anyone, but Gravois didn't hide his Catholic faith because he never forgot. As Leonard Skinner liked to sing, there is someone up above. Just hope they got gumbo and white rice in heaven. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Greg Harding, and I'll show you some clips I had in a recent interview with John. He'll be missed and loved in this area, no doubt about it. We'll be right back. This segment was brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. All right, welcome back. Remembering John Gravois. I'm on the set with, once again, one of John's good buddies, one of my good buddies, Greg Harding. Great athlete in his own right, great person. He was a school board member, District 2. And Greg, before I come back to ask you any questions, I asked John on a recent interview about those old trips to the Saints game, and probably we were watching you at the time, in your days with the Saints, but let's roll in. I can't remember what he said, but I'm fixing to hear it again. You remember those trips we'd make to the Saints games?
Oh, absolutely. I'll never forget going to the Saints games. And it was the time of my life. I mean, I loved being in the press box, but the most special times I had with Saints, as well as the New Orleans Jazz, were taking photos on the sidelines. And getting to see, and then getting to go in the locker room after the games and seeing people like Conrad Dobler, Archie Manning, Bobby Scott, Ricky Jackson, Pete Maravich.
I still have pictures that you would give me the negatives. I was taking a class at Nichols. Well, actually, I had graduated, but I could go back to the dark room and develop the pictures. I still have some of those photos. That was some fun times. And there you hear it. Some of those are probably you, Greg, but we had some good time. He loved being at the Saints game. He was fun to be around.
He was a very funny person. I mean, you have to get to know John. And John was, like I said, if you had a problem with him, then something was wrong with you. Mm-hmm. John was one of those guys that basically lived life and let life live. And I spoke to his wife last week, and it was very touching because he would always ask me about my daughter, Shakira. Mm-hmm. Asked how she was doing, the doctor, and then he was very proud of my son Gregory, because Coach Gregory went to Terrebonne High, and now he's at Nicholls State University. Mm-hmm. But during those times, I didn't know that he was in his last days, and he never did let on to me. Mm-hmm. And as tight as we were, close we was, that it was his last days. He was constantly telling me that he was going to fight this disease and that he was going to beat it. And when I found out he passed away, that kind of hit me, because the whole time me and him talking and texting, he never let me know. Mm-hmm. He never let me know what he was going through.
He was steadfast. One of the things, I'm going to roll it in on this segment, is that back in the day, I had about, $500 some in the bank from working during the summers before I really got into my career. And John wrote an article on the pyramid scheme that was going around, but I'd put up $500 thinking, the next day, the day after, I would get $1,000 or $1,500 back. We talked about that. Let's roll that in. I had put my life savings when I was in college. Me and Mike Haydell each put $250 up for a pyramid deal that was going on in Houma. And we were about to get to the top and split our money. And John Gravois writes a story, and I lose my $250, but that was one of the best lessons I ever learned in my life. You remember that?
How can I forget that? You weren't the only one. Oh yeah, I think a lot of other people still remember that. But yeah, that taught me a lot about journalism back then. That's when I first started getting a lot of my big threats.
That's a story I had to mention.
People did not like that story.
Oh, well, it's life.
It was a lot more fun when I hung out in the bushes at Nicholls State and caught them doing illegal football practices and got them a reprimand. That was a lot more fun, kind of. But boy, messing with people's money, that was, there were some people in the community that didn't like the pyramid and what was going on, and they went to Mr. Dill, and he's like, we got to do stories on it, and he grabbed me, and away we went.
Oh, look, the good goes with the bad when you're in this business. We know that. Greg, I was broke then, and he made me broke, or when he broke the story, but it was the right thing to do. But we can laugh about it now, but back then it was pretty serious.
John was a great journalist that he would make you believe going to hell was a good thing to do.
All right, on that note, we'll take a break. We're going to come back. More comments from Greg Harding, more comments from John Gravois in a recent interview I guess I did that a year and a half ago, 2 years, I'm not sure, but we'll be right back. Don't go away. This segment was brought to you by Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. All right, we're back. I'm joined by Greg Harding once again, school board member, but he was a great athlete here in the area and a dear friend of John Gravois, who got his start at the Courier and who many people love in the area. And to have a John Gravois in your community writing stories, most people don't understand what it's like for me and you to have had John in our lives. It's different than journalism today. It really is. John was just one of those old-fashioned journalists. You know, it was what it was. You know, black and white, period. That's the way it is. And that's the John you knew, too.
Well, I think, Martin, you make a perfect example because we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have all these other ways
We
to
didn't
get.
have HTV.
No, you didn't have HTV.
Yeah.
So we relied on guys like John Gravois to tell the story. And he really did a great job. And people, I guess maybe if you can identify with Chris Singleton, who was a great journalist in his own, John, Chris and John were basically like brothers. They wrote the same type of way. And every time that Chris would write a story, I would think about John because he reminded of the stories and how thorough that he was. He would kind of more like a good publisher. He would paint a picture of the story and you can visualize what he was writing. And that's kind of hard to do when you start talking about sports.
Right. But let's do that. I'm going to stay with Greg because we'll run some bonus of the interview on Facebook and YouTube, but for the HTV broadcast, I want more of Greg's comments. What was it like? He's representing you, him and his brother, but yet he's covering you. But that was unique, wasn't it?
Well, you know, the funny thing about it was, to make you laugh, John wrote some great stories about me in high school.
But Greg, you were a stellar athlete. Look, and you were also in the band.
Yeah.
You would put your band uniform on at halftime, play, and then go in the locker room for a little bit to get dressed again. That was pretty unique, too.
Yeah, I think he called me Superman or some type of stuff.
That's
along
right,
that
he
line.
did. Yeah.
Right. And then he followed me to Nichols. And he kind of built me up. I said, well, God, dog, if this guy is doing all these great things for me, then I might as well go on and trust him and let him be my agent for my pro football career.
You remember I was doing the Sonny Jackson show back then, and what you had, 8 or 9 interceptions in the year?
I think I had 9. I finished second in the nation interception. Emerson Walls finished first.
In the last game,
And
I
I
think
finished
he
second.
beat you, huh?
Yes, he beat me in the last game. I think it was the Bayou Classic.
Yeah.
He ended up getting
Wow.
2.
Unbelievable. But what was it like? We got about a minute and a half left to have a guy like John Gravois, who you knew was going to give you the pub you needed. But you knew if you had a bad game, he's going to write about that too. But fortunately, you had a lot more good games than bad.
Right. Well, John was one of the guys that I would go to war with. In other words, I get in the foxhole, and when things get tough, I don't have to worry about looking around and see if John was going to be there. John would always be there for you. And I want to give my condolences out to his wife, Suzanne, and his family, and his family that's out there in Austin, Texas. I mean, the world has lost a great journalist, a great person, and I have lost a great friend.
Yeah, well said, Greg. And just in closing, just to let everyone know, so many memories of John Gravois. We were in competing businesses when you think about it, but our friendship lasted a long time. And, you know, we didn't talk much, but when we talked, so many fond memories of the past, those Saints games, and got to interview him, as you saw, when he was doing his cookbook and everything else. But like Greg said, we were so fortunate to have a guy like John Gravois. And I know he moved away, but he always had his heart right here in this area. And certainly I do want to pass on my condolences for the entire family. And just thank God that we were able to have a guy like John Gravois around us, and he made this place better, and he made it more honest as a reporter. God bless you, John, and Godspeed. A lot of people remember you from the Houma Courier, but take us from there, and where did you end up at?
Oh yeah, I started at the Houma Courier, and let me start off by mentioning that is a little tribute uh, to Anita LaRose, our teacher and journalism advisor from Terrebonne, who was one of my early mentors way back when. And it was during my time at Terrebonne when I was a just 16, I started working part time at the Houma Daily Courier for Ray Dill and Ken Wells and Jerry Herman. And Anita LaRose was a very special leader who helped me and a lot of people find their love for the business. So I want to give a shout out to her family and heap praises upon everything that she did. Um, I got started at the Courier covering sports just at first. And one of my big breakthroughs was when Ray Dill and Ken Wells came up with the idea of making me Pierre the Cajun, and I would do weekly picks of all the high school football games. And the players really, every time I got them wrong, they loved throwing me in the shower. So I got an early start doing high school football. And then they slowly started expanding my universe and letting me, cover Nickel State. And I followed Greg and some others from Terrebonne to Nickel State, and then started doing some LSU and the Saints and the New Orleans Jazz and a whole host of things. And I also started covering, I mean, because in Louisiana, as well as Texas and in the rest of the world, I mean, let's face it, there's not much difference between the worlds of sports and politics. So it actually was a natural segue for me to go from doing sports to doing news and politics. And it was while I was still at Nichols that my schedule was light one semester, and Ray Dill talked me into covering the school board while I was still a student at Nickel State. So I started covering news and politics young too. And, I went on to, I followed Ken Wells, again, one of my original mentors. Dr. Al Delahaye, he's also left us, but he was a great, great man. And he actually grew up with my dad in Port Allen. And Delahaye was a former faculty member at Mizzou, the University of Missouri. And he set Ken up with a graduate teaching assistantship, pipeline to this particular professor. And after Ken left, I actually got Ken's the same TA job that Ken had. Ken went on to study global economics and finance in the University of Missouri's London program. And because I loved politics so much, I got into the Washington program. And that's where I really got hooked on politics.
What person did you interview where you were sitting across from them and you went, wow, I can't believe I'm interviewing? Who would it be?
Oh, I did. I went on, when I left Louisiana, I went to work for the Houston Post and became a political correspondent. And I got to do the White House for 4 years. So I covered the last 2 years of President George H.W. Bush's administration, Bush 41, we call him. Spent a lot of time with George W. Bush, too, when he was getting ready to run for governor. And then did the first 2 years of Bill Clinton's administration. So getting to hang out with the Bushes and Clinton and Al Gore was a big deal. But I got to tell you, like you bring up our fondness for sports, the really big people that I just couldn't get over interviewing weren't the politicians. It was Archie Manning was a big one. Pete Maravich was a big one. Got to interview Kareem Abdul-Jabbar once. And I'll never forget one of the Sugar Bowls I got to cover. I was the first reporter in the locker room and talked to Tony Dorsett right after Pitt won the Sugar Bowl. That was special. But the most special of all, probably, believe it or not, was for an exhibition game that I covered at the Superdome between the New York Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles. You and I are old enough to remember that back in the early days of the Superdome, they would do an annual series of exhibition games.
Yes,
and
sir.
I got to see Reggie Jackson hit a home run off of Jim Palmer.
Wow.
And of course, both are now big Hall of Famers. And I interviewed Reggie after. He was my pro sports hero, and he did not like the questions I was asking. It's like I had taken his pyramid money away. But he got so hot, he started cussing me out, and then he would start spelling the cuss words for me. So, I mean, Reggie was probably the most amazing single interview that I did, but there were so many big moments in sports, and it was just eye-opening. I'll also never forget the first time I went into a Saints locker room, and the first thing I saw was All-Pro offensive lineman Conrad Dobler. He was naked in a tub of ice, drinking a Budweiser and smoking a Marlboro. And, not the kind of image that young men like you and I used to have of the players back then.
Right.
Things have cleaned up a little bit since then, but sports was always so special, always so special.
This segment was brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your partner is good health.